Tennessee. For those of you that don't know, this is my husband, Jared. We're going to lead worship this morning, but first we're going to start off with a few announcements. I just want to welcome everyone here. If this is your first time here, there are connection cards in the back of your seat in front of you, or there should be. If not, we can get one to you. You can just put any prayer requests or any information that we need to know if you need to update your information in the offering baskets in the back of the room. First things first, we are having a really awesome women's event coming up. It's going to be on March 24th and 25th. Seating is limited, so you do have to go online and register. You can get with someone, Barbara Willis, if you need some help registering. She can get you helped out. But it is going to be a dramatic storytelling and teaching on the life of Mary of Bethany, which is Lazarus' sister. So should be pretty interesting, and I'm pretty excited about going. Yeah, and then I think Jared has an announcement too.
Baptism classes are coming up. Mr. John Douglas, I think he's online, had a wonderful joke last week about donuts and meeting Joel. I will not retell it because I won't do it justice, but please go back and listen to last week's service so you can hear John's Dunkin' Donuts joke about Joel. But next week, March 12th, I think it is for kids through 5th grade. If you are interested in baptism, kids through 5th grade is next week. The following week will be middle school and high schoolers. If you are an adult, you can also reach out to Joel, and we'll get you signed up for baptism is there too. The Egg Scramble is coming up. I don't have a ton of information for this other than we are already collecting eggs and candy. More information will be forthcoming. Yeah. It's up there, and volunteers are needed. The Connection Desk has people that can tell you a lot more than me. So
we're so good at this.
I feel like we're doing really good.
One and done at the host, I'm pretty sure.
You have the spoon, though, so it's good. Okay, so finally, we're going to do the 1-minute meet and greet kind of thing, right? So obviously, I'm up here sniffling and stuff like that. So there are germs in the air. If you do not feel comfortable, you don't have to go shake John's hand. He will understand. It's fine. If you want to wave at somebody, whatever you need to do, whatever you feel comfortable with, we're going to do a 1-minute timer, and then once we start that, we're going to get right into worship. Amen. We're so fast.
So what's the spoon for?
The highest were welcome. I was lost, but he brought me. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Realize He has ransomed His grace runs. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died.
Let's just sing that chorus one more time. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I all throughout my history, your faithfulness walked beside me. The winter storms made waves free. In every season, from where I'm standing, I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Help me remember when I'm weak. Fear may come, fear will leave. You lead my heart to victory. You are my strength, and you always will be. 'Cause I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. See the cross, the empty grave, the evidence is there. All my sin rolled away because of you, oh Jesus. See the cross, the empty grave, the evidence is there. All my sin rolled away because of you, oh Jesus. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. So why should I fear? Oh, the evidence is there. Why should I fear? Oh, the evidence is there.
Father, I just want to thank you. I praise you for showing us the evidence of you being here with us every single Sunday when we meet. We feel your presence. We know you're here. We feel your goodness. I pray that you would work through us through this worship, that you would use this as a time to minister to us, that you would use this as a time to speak to our hearts. Let us know the direction you'd like us to go. Father, I pray that this worship we're having this morning is pleasing to you and that it brings you joy and that you feel the love we're sending it to you with. I pray all these things in your precious Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like
If we looked at a timeline of the Old Testament, we would find the book of Ruth happening during the time of Judges, before 1 Samuel, but after Joshua. In Judah, there's a town named Bethlehem, and in that town, there's a man named Elimelech who was married to a woman named Naomi. They had 2 sons named Mahlon and Chilion. In those days, there's a famine in Bethlehem, and they decided to travel to the country of Moab to sojourn there, which means they didn't intend to stay permanently. While in Moab, Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi with the 2 sons. These 2 sons married women from Moab. Chilion married a woman named Orpah, and Mahlon married a woman named Ruth. After 10 years of living in Moab, Mahlon and Chilion die, thus leaving Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth widowed. Naomi is now in a foreign land, without her husband and without her sons. Naomi hears that the famine in Bethlehem is over and desires to return home. She turns to her 2 daughters-in-law and tells them to return to their families. But Ruth and Orpah refuse, saying they will go with Naomi. This is how Naomi responds. Why would you? I don't have new sons to give you for husbands, and I'm too old to get a husband to have more sons for you. But even if I did, would you wait for them, refrain from marriage until they were old enough? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Together they wept. Orpah kissed Naomi goodbye and went home, but Ruth stayed. Naomi argues, but Ruth says, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. They then traveled to Bethlehem together. When they had returned, the town was stirred up because of them, asking if this was really Naomi. Her response is, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So they had returned to Bethlehem, Ruth with her mother-in-law, Naomi.
Good morning. Welcome to our Ruth series, Ruin to Redemption. We're excited to walk through this Old Testament book as preparation for Resurrection Sunday, for the Easter season. And we think it's a unique way to see how God is at work bringing redemption to us. We recognize that the greatest way through the cross, through the empty tomb, through what Jesus has done for us. But all throughout Scripture, there are these illustrative stories. There's these journeys. There's these opportunities to see even the redemption story alive in the book of Ruth. So we're excited to walk through that with you all. Now, you all have known me about 1.5 years now. I'm Joel. I'm one of the pastors here. Came on staff a little while back. And you get to see me in the complete seasoned package that I am, all right? When it comes to ministry, I'm a well-oiled machine now, all right? And you're like, that guy makes no mistakes. He has meticulous planning, foresight, just wisdom oozing out of me, and an incredible fashion sense, all right? So, you get to see that, but I haven't always been this way, all right? In my early days of ministry, and I was a youth pastor, I really felt like that's all I would ever do. I made all kinds of mistakes. One of them, right in your nation's capital. I had a mission trip with about 50 youth, and we went up to D.C., and I planned one day where we were going to get to just kind of ride the metro, the subway into town and like do sightseeing. I had kind of like a tourist day. I had even arranged for a private tour with our congressman at the Capitol. So it was kind of this cool day, and like everything was kind of plugging along. So we roll in, we park our vans, we jump on the metro. I grew up kind of giving metro passes and like zipping around the city on my metro pass and kind of going to see different things. So I was like, I got this. We get the kids there. We're like doing all our stuff. Like everything worked out. I'm marching them around DC, showing them stuff. We meet our congressman. We get these awesome pictures right on the steps of the Capitol. Our youth choir on this mission trip with our congressman is really neat. And like we're heading back, and we're literally walking off the metro, and I've got one of my chaperones with me, and I said, I can't believe today worked out. I mean, it's coming out of my mouth. I was like, it worked out as good as it did, and we round the corner, and all of our church vans were gone. All of them. And I was like, where are our vans? We parked here, right? And all my drivers like, yes, this is where we parked. We parked right here. And I was like, yeah, they were in these spots. And then my gaze went upwards. Again, I wasn't the well-oiled ministry machine that I am now. And there was the sign, no parking. All of our vans, 5 vans, were towed away while we enjoyed the sights of the nation's capital. So I looked to my leaders and I said, keep them here in the subway station while I figure out what we're going to do. I call, my sister still lived there. She was in her 30-something stage. You know what happens when you're 30? You buy a Jeep Wrangler. That's what happens in your 30s. She didn't have kids then. She's like, no kids, you get a Jeep Wrangler. It's actually in the adult handbook. You'll find it. If you're 30 without children, you'll buy a Jeep Wrangler. And so she comes, and I'm stuffing drivers into her Jeep Wrangler to go to the impound lot. I had called them. They're like, they're here. You just come, you bring cash, and we'll get them out. And so then we get there. I ring the bell, and out comes the scariest man I've ever seen in my whole life. This enormous man, he was huge, huge in a strong way, like gonna kill me if I don't pay cash to get the church vans, with the Baptist church name on the side. I don't know if you're a child of the 80s like I am, but I grew up loving the WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation. There was a wrestler I grew up named the Junkyard Dog. That's what this man looked like. This was an actual junkyard. He came out. He had chains around his neck like the Junkyard Dog. And he comes out, and I tremble as I hand him this big pile of cash. And we got all of our vans out of Hawk. It's no fun when we lose things, all right? It is no fun. I was ruined in this moment because not only did I strand 50 teenagers in a metro station in Washington, D.C., not only did I get 5 church vans impounded, all with our name on it, not only was I being held hostage by the scariest man I've ever seen in my whole life, but I had to call our church administrator. And they're not all nice like Abby is, all right? She's a nice one. I'm still scared of her. I still don't make my mistakes. I turn my stuff in. But this one, then he was scary, and I had to tell him, I spent $700 of our petty cash. He said, why? I said, to get our vans out of an impound lot. Losing something it's a powerless feeling, isn't it? It doesn't matter if we lose our car or 5 church vans or our phone, our keys, our wallet. I lost my wallet the other night. I was very frightened. Or we just lose the readers so we can't see our Bibles. Just a hint for those of you with readers in here, they're on top of your head, all right? You haven't lost them. They're up there. My mom was looking for her readers recently. She had 2 pairs on top of her head as she was looking for her readers. But what if what we lose is our spouse and our children and our homeland, our security, our very lives? That's what's churning in Ruth chapter 1. That's what's going on, is the loss of everything that gave up protection, provision, security, safety. What if that's what we lose? It's not our phone or our wallet or our readers. What if we lose that very sense of safety, protection, provision, security? That's what's happening with Elimelech. That's what's going to happen with Naomi, and with Ruth, and with Orpah. 2 things happen to us when we feel ruin come on. One is this: we'll focus on all the ruin that has come to us. This is the woe is me kind of mentality. All this has happened. I've lost everything. Woe is me. There is another option, and it's this: we find the hope that is possible for us. Both of these concepts are at play in the book of Ruth. Both of them are at play in Ruth chapter 1 and in the chapters beyond, of woe is me or what if. And the same is true for you and I. When ruin comes, when we have lost all that's near and dear, all that we hold close, we're left with those 2 options. Am I going to focus on the ruin, or am I going to find hope in what is to come? One will leave us in ruin. One will leave us there. We'll just remain in that ruined state. And one of these will lead us towards redemption. We are 6 weeks from Easter. Just a little plug: buy plastic eggs, bring them in, buy us candy. We're going to give an Easter egg hunt as a gift to our neighbors. But we're 6 weeks from Easter. And I'm not sure where you are, because I don't know all of you as well as I'd like. Some of you may be in that place of ruin. You're focused on all that's falling apart, all that's changing, all that you don't have power and control over. Some of you might be on that side of redemption. Hey, things are gliding along. Or maybe you're just somewhere in between. Whether you're in ruin, whether you're feeling and celebrating redemption, or somewhere in between, hear me, there is hope. There is hope. Hope for today, hope for tomorrow, hope for a Redeemer. And that's what we want to see in this series as together we journey through the book of Ruth. That there is hope. And the story of Naomi and Ruth, who really become the central characters of this Old Testament book, they're given those same 2 choices. Do they just focus on the ruin, or do they see and sense and believe in faith that there is hope? Because we know this just like they do. Life can change any moment, right? Catastrophe can come. Pain. So I invite you to kind of come on this journey with us for the next 5 weeks as we go through the book of Ruth together. And today we're going to look at chapter 1. So if you have a Bible or an app or whatever and you want to kind of read along with us, I love that little video. We'll show those each week. It kind of gives a good overview and flow of what each chapter brings. But if you want to go with us to Ruth chapter 1, we're going to be bopping all through it today. As first we consider this, how Elimelech and Naomi, their family, they were lost in a foreign land. They were lost in a foreign land. Let's read together the first couple of verses in Ruth chapter 1 as it says this. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife had 2 sons, and the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons Maham and Chilion. And they went from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went into the country of Moab, and they remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, he died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they took up Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they lived here for about 10 years. It starts with those words, in the days when the judges ruled. So we have Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Then we get into the Samuels and the Kings, and as God continues to grow the nation of Israel. But right here in those time of Judges, it was a lawless time until the judges came up. It was a period of unrest in Judah amongst God's people. Social, political, spiritual. And on top of that, according to Ruth chapter 1, there was a famine. A famine had come to that space, so much so that Elimelech and Naomi and their two sons, they literally left for greener pastures. All right, it wasn't figurative. They were looking for greener pastures, and they head to Moab, which was at the time lush and fertile, a land of farming or of herding, and it was in the corner of Judah. And they had rainfall, which shows the fact that to the people of God, to the Israelites at this time, this was divine judgment that they were under. The judges, it was the time of the judges, and God was judging them for their sins. Because Moab and Bethlehem, where Elimelech was from, was only about 40 miles. And Bethlehem was feeling famine, whereas Moab was not. So Elimelech and his family, they packed up their bags and they moved to Beverly. They went down to Moab. And we see this progression that happens here. Look at the progression in those verses again. It says that in verse 1, they sojourned in the country of Moab. That's temporary, as our video shared with us. And then it says in verse 2 that they remained there. Right? It's a little bit more than sojourning now. In verse 3, it says that Elimelech died and he left his wife with two sons. I have two sons. I don't want to be alone with them. Now Naomi was. And then it says that they lived there for 10 years. So in 4 verses, we see this progression where there's a movement. Yet, yes, Moab's only 40 miles away, but when it comes to that country, in the country that Elimelech and his family's from, it might as well have been 4,000 miles. There's great differences there. And they lived there, it says. 10 years at least, they lived there. They settled. They settled is what we're getting at. This is a foreign land. They take foreign wives in a place where there are foreign gods, and Moab had many of them. There was a plethora of gods, lowercase g, in this country. The highest, the greatest god in Moab, his name was Molech. And Molech was worshipped with a statue on this platform that would move amongst the villages of Moab. And there was a fire that was kind of burning inside of this statue of Molech. And on the platform was kind of a trap door. And to please Molech, the people of Moab would set their children on this platform, and that trapdoor would fall open, and that child would be sacrificed into the burning belly of Molech. That's what's happening in this country. This is where Elimelech and Naomi settled. This is where they chose to live. This was home now. Now, I'm not saying Elimelech was sinful, Naomi was sinful. There was a pragmatism behind what was going on here. They needed to find a place where they could provide for their family. But we see that it comes to ruin, doesn't it? And how quickly things change, how quickly we can move from making a choice of sojourning to staying there. All of a sudden, we're settling in our sin. We're settling in our rebellion. I had this sweet teacher in 6th grade. Her name was Miss Lee. God bless her. She still needs your prayers from the PTSD that I brought to her. I wasn't like mean and ugly. I just was bad. I talked all the time. I know that shocks you. I talked all the time. I was always like class clown, goofing, and I constantly was getting in trouble. And she would move me my desk. I would sit out in the hall all the time because she couldn't teach the other kids. And one day she said, "That's it. I've had enough. I'm calling your parents." See, I always wanted to do enough trouble that people, like I got their attention, but not so much that Ray and Pat Reynolds had to find out. So I said, you can't, Miss Lee, you can't call them. You can't call them. And then I'm like, I'll do anything to get out of this. I was like, look, my oldest sister was in college at the time. I said, she's coming home this weekend, and my parents won't let me see her if you call them. That's the picture I painted about my parents. You all haven't met Ray and Pat Reynolds. They are saints on earth. They are sweet little angels. And I'm painting this picture that they would lock me away and not allow me to see my sister if she calls them. And guess what? She didn't call them. I was way down. I wasn't just sojourning in my lies. I wasn't just sojourning in my sin. I was camped out living in it. Until a few months later, when she was like, I've had enough, and she brought my parents in, and Mom comes home that evening, and she goes, you told her we were going to lock you in your room away from your sister? I was like, not a good one. Not a good choice there. How quickly we move, right? We're just kind of like, let me just sniff this out. And all of a sudden, we are living there. That's home. That's how quickly our sin can take us into rebellion. It'll take us further and faster than we ever realize. This progression away for Elimelech and for Naomi, it took them further than they ever imagined. For his family, at first, it was practical. But now, like we all can see, it can become sin. It can become rebellion. It can become, we're just going to do this. Some of us. Here for this family, it started as survival. And maybe it is for you too. Maybe you're making these choices just to kind of keep your head above water. But for that family and for your family, could there be more? Could there be something else for you as we search for answers, for solid ground, for protection, for redemption? So it's good to know that Naomi, as she's searching for what's next, it's good to know that she had a friend. It's good to know that she had a friend. See, she was lost with a friend in a foreign land. Still not great, but at least she wasn't alone, right? Let's continue the story here of Ruth as we continue starting in verse 6. It says this, then she, that's Naomi, arose with her daughter-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people, given them food. The famine was over. So she set out from that place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. And then she kissed them, but they lifted up their voices and they wept. And they said to her, no, we'll return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet have sons in my wombs that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait until they're grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. So they lifted their voices and they wept again. And Orpah kissed her and her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And then she arose with her daughter-in-laws to return. Oh, sorry, I already read that one. That's for later. So we see this change that's going on. And we see her saying to her daughters, go back, go back, go back. It uses the word return. Return happens here. 12 times the word return is used in the book of Ruth. 6 times in chapter 1 alone. I wonder if God's telling us something. I wonder if we're seeing that word again and again, if he's trying to tell us something. You're not where you're supposed to be. Return. This is not what I had planned for you. Return. Come back to me. This land was not for Naomi. This culture, these people, this sojourn had gone on way too long. To sojourn is one thing, to remain is a whole different thing. And see, in the life of our searching, in the life of our choices, and those consequences, in moments of obedience or moments of sinfulness, as we grow our faith or we show a lack of faith, two things, it all comes boiled down to two things: to remain or to return. And that's what's happening for Naomi. Do I remain here in this plan that doesn't seem to be a really good plan, or do I return? And the same is for us. No matter where we are, no matter what's going on, do we remain in that sin or do we return to the Lord? The challenge for Naomi is that she's now facing widowhood, just like Orpah is and Ruth is. Widowhood was a stigma at that time. It was a lack of ability to provide for oneself. But in deeper emotional and spiritual ways, it was a mark of disgrace. You don't have a husband? How do you take care of yourself if he's not around? Spiritually, it was often seen as a mark of sinfulness. What had that woman done to make God so mad that her husband died? The Old Testament has several provisions of care for widows. One is, if the widow remained childless, she could return to her family, to her ancestors, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whomever in her family. And as long as she remained childless, she could be taken under their care. That was kind of impossible for Naomi, wasn't it? Because she's in Moab right now, not in Bethlehem. She's away from her family and her ancestors and her kin. The Old Testament also talks again and again about caring for, providing for those widows that have no family, that have no place to go. We were to care for them. But again, this would have been difficult for Naomi because she's in Moab. They don't read the same sacred text that the Jews did. And we're going to follow the law. The Moabites had their own sacred text. Heck, they've got statues of Molech going around eating up kids. They're not going to care for a widow. They're eating the babies. So this left Naomi and Ruth and Orpah in a very dangerous place. It's not just hopeless for them, it's dangerous. They could be abused. They could be hurt. There's a lot on the line for them. It's not just that they can't provide for themselves, they can't protect themselves. And it says in Ruth that they heard in the fields that the Lord had visited Bethlehem. They were out in the fields. I want you to know they weren't out there as laborers. They weren't out there like hired on hands. They were out there begging for the scraps. That's how catastrophic, that's how much ruin had come to this woman, had come to her family. They were out begging in the fields. These women had nothing. Well, almost nothing. They had each other, didn't they? They have this beautiful connection and bond. So much so that when Naomi says go, they said no. They held on to her. They wept. And when Orpah finally decided to go back to her family, because that's what a widow does, they go back to their family and they're going to be taken care of, Ruth clung to her. Clung to her. This is my family now. Some of you haven't got to meet my daughter, Rachel. She is the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Rachel got about halfway through school and we were seeing some things weren't clicking and had some testing done, and Rachel falls on the autism spectrum. But she was not to be deterred. The school she went to, which was not really designed for people who think and go about life the way this is where I am. And as much as people loved on Rachel, she just never had that friend. She never had that connection. I'm of the philosophy that we all just need one good friend. And I prayed that for Rachel for a long, long time. That she had one friend for her. Because she was this square peg in a round hole kind of school. She didn't look like the other girls. She didn't act like the other girls. And I prayed all the time. Just give her one friend, God. And there was this girl she kind of clicked with, but then she moved. And when I came back from Iraq, I was gone for a year. Come to find out, these two were texting back and forth all the time, that this friendship was growing. And even though she lived somewhere else, Rachel had that person. She had that person that saw her the way I did, that she's extraordinary and special and wonderful and hilarious. And she finally had that. And last summer, we let Rachel fly down and spend like a long weekend with this friend. And I went to the airport and I picked Rachel up when she came back, and she's just glowing because she had this weekend with her friend. And I said, tell me what all you did. And they went to the beach and they went to a store, and Rachel goes, Dad, I know this is immature of me. And Rachel's the kind of kid, I'm like, please just be immature. Like, get in trouble. It's okay. And so I'm thinking like she did something really crazy. She goes, I know this is kind of immature of me, but I did it anyway because she said, I always wanted to. She said, we went to a store, and she goes, you know those little necklaces that are the heart? And it says best friends, and they're broken apart, and you each wear them when you're apart. And she goes, I always wanted one. She said, I never had a friend. And she said, Dad, I know I'm 19. I said, shut up. Buy as many of them as you want. We need that friend, don't we? Especially when catastrophe comes. Naomi is in ruin. She has no husband, no sons, no family, no home, no land, no religion. But she had Ruth. She had Ruth. Everyone needs a Ruth, especially when life falls apart. We need somebody who is going to hang with us and point to hope. There's somebody who's going to keep that connection, keep that faith. Ruth is essentially looking at her mother-in-law saying, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm with you. When all falls apart, we need that. We need to know that we have that friend, and we need that friend to point us and say, you know what? There's a Redeemer out there. I believe it. This was a season of solidarity for Naomi and for Ruth. And Ruth said, I'm with you. I'm sticking with you. Because God was not done with Naomi. God was not done with her line. God was not done with her family. And God has redemption sometimes, most times, all the times on the other side of ruin. So what we have last is this, is the faith of a friend in a foreign land. We read a few more verses from Ruth. And she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. And where you die, I'll die there too. And there I'll be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything, but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said no more. And so she returns to her people. And she says, I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley season. We like an underdog story, don't we? This weekend, we had men's retreat. It was a really great time to gather here. And one of the best parts about leading it is not all the work, but it's doing the things that you want. So like our drinks and our food, it's just what I wanted to eat. I didn't even ask the guys if you had like dietary issues. It's like, we're doing for Joel. And I've always been that way. When I was a youth pastor, my students knew that I would do games. It wasn't for their enjoyment. If I thought it was funny, we were going to do it. And one time we had a retreat with our middle schoolers, and we had an event called the Pumpkin Chunkin'. And what we did is I bought the biggest pumpkins that I could find, and I gave them to the tiniest sixth graders that I could find. And I just watched them throw pumpkins. And I had this girl in my group. Her name was Katie Belcher. She's still tiny, all right? She is a small, petite woman now. But when she was in sixth grade, she could fit in my shirt pocket, all right? She slept on a cotton ball. That's how tiny she was. And we had this retreat, and I handed her this ginormous pumpkin. And the whole point of the game was throw the pumpkin as far as you could throw it. That was it. And I just sat back with my tea, just enjoying the show. But something extraordinary happened because we love underdogs. We love the little guy. All the other sixth graders went and they had thrown it. And so there was just these like scattered pumpkins out in this field. And all the middle school ministry is like lined on both sides of this field. And they're cheering on. Everybody kind of wants their team to win. And then the last person to go, and I set this up on purpose, all right? Katie Belcher had to go last, and she comes trudging up with this huge, I should have given her a wheelbarrow. That's how big this was and how little she was. And she gets up there, and she throws it, and it goes out, and then it rolls, and it rolls. And it was like watching the greatest sporting event of all time because it's going, and it's moving past the other pumpkins, and then it just has just enough inertia. It's moving, and I'm like, she's going to win this. And that pumpkin rolled over. And my guest speaker that weekend is my best friend, so he can attest to this. He said, Joel, when that happened, my hands went in the air. Like, I didn't do it. Like, it just happened. It was amazing because we love the little guy. We love somebody who surprises us. And Ruth is that in this story. She shows amazing commitment here. Amazing friendship, solidarity, but also faith. Ruth came from a pagan land. Look there in the verse, it says, so Naomi returned with Ruth. It doesn't say Ruth or Ruth, her daughter-in-law. They make sure to put in the Moabite, don't they? They're making sure that we know this. 7 times in the book of Ruth, it talks about who she is and where she's from. The book's named after her, by the way. I think the story's going to come out okay. It lands in the Bible, right? If this didn't go good, it wasn't going to show up in Holy Scripture. Holy Spirit is a little bit better than that. It's in there. Some good stuff's going to happen. Hang in there with us. But they say again and again and again, the Moabite, they love to remind us that she's pagan, whereas Naomi is not. Naomi says to this pagan woman, Ruth, your sister-in-law's gone back. Why are you going to hang with me? But an extraordinary thing happens, or is happening. It's not just the survival of these 2 women. It's not just kind of extending their story. God's grace is moving. And if you continue with us in this series, you'll see how God's grace is growing. It's moving. And God's grace, for the first time in the history of his people, is going outside of Israel. That's why this book is so significant. That's why they tell us again and again that Ruth was a Moabite. Ruth was a pagan, because God's grace is flowing down to this pagan widow woman named Ruth. It's still got to come from the Israelites. And spoiler alert, the Redeemer, capital R Redeemer, is from the nation of Israel. But we see grace growing and grace on the move. And that happens to do something in Ruth. In her very young faith, very, very young, budding faith here, this grace growing inside of her, it compels her to say 3 things to her mother-in-law. She says, do not urge me to leave you. Don't say it anymore. I'm going to be with you. She says, your people shall be my people. It's not that she didn't have people to go to. Orpah went back to her people, didn't she? Ruth is saying something more here. It is a faith statement. Your path, your people, that's my people now. And then she says this extraordinary verse, your God is now my God. Where you go, I go. Where you die, I die. Where you're buried, I'm buried. My story is your story, is what Ruth is saying here. And that all comes from faith. There are 2 books in the Bible named after women. Just 2. Now, there's numerous women in the Bible, many whose faith was noble. There are many women in the Bible who are part of allowing the covenant of God, helping the covenant of God to spread, the gospel to move forward. There are many in the Bible whose service is remarkable. But only Ruth and Esther have books named after them. So maybe we should look at their faith, shouldn't we? Maybe we should look at what Ruth did and see that's something to emulate in our lives. You don't have to come to the whole series. I hope you do. I hope you hang with us all the way to Easter, because this is a beautiful book and a powerful story. But if you only hear one thing, hear what Ruth is saying in these 2 verses. I am with you, Naomi. I am with your people. And most importantly, I'm with your God. These marks, these statements of faith that senses God's movement is what Ruth is showing here. Regardless, she's seen God move regardless of the land of her birth, her family of origin, her gender, her status. She senses that God is doing something, that redemption is on the horizon. A faith that says, God is not done with you, Naomi. God is not done with me. We're widows, but God's not done. And the same can be said for redemption. It's out there. It's out there. It's out there. What we see in her faith is a season of surety. She doesn't know how it's all going to wrap up, but she's showing that faith. Hebrews 11 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. In Ruth 22, it tells us, it's not the most exciting closing verse, but there's a lot happening here. It says, Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, Ruth the pagan, her daughter-in-law with her. And they returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. The barley harvest, that's important. That is the evidence of things unseen. That is the substance of things hoped for, because it is this harvest where God begins to unfold his plan. For this woman, for her daughter-in-law, for their family, for their future. It is in the barley harvest that God will show redemption, that you and I, even in this day and age, we can draw from. See, seasons are changing here. Seasons are changing. Harvesters are going to come to Bethlehem, and one of them, his name is Boaz. And he's the redeemer for Ruth, for Naomi, for their family, lowercase r. But there is a great redeemer, capital R, on the horizon. When things are ruined in our lives, it weakens us, doesn't it? It immobilizes us. It brings fear, and we fear staying, and we fear going, we fear praying, we fear showing faith. It just keeps us stuck. But what if you hear today this, around the corner, there's a redeemer. Just around the way, there is someone, and that someone is a redeemer. That there is hope for you, for your family, for your story, for your journey. About 3 years ago, it's 3 years ago this week, my battalion landed in Iraq. And it was a very chippy time to be getting to Iraq. Very uncertain days, lots of volatility. And at the base that we were assigned to, in charge of their security, we started getting attacked pretty constantly. When the attacks came during the day, I was usually with my assistant, and some of you have heard about my redneck Spitfire assistant, Terry Faye, running around in her flip-flops in the Iraqi mud. I've shared that before. But when you're a chaplain in the military, you don't carry a weapon, you've got a bodyguard. And Terry Faye was my 5'4" bodyguard. And I had no fear as long as I was with Terry Faye. When I was not with Terry Faye, I wanted to get to her. So at night when things started happening, and I had my own room, I was about a quarter of a mile from Terry Faye, we had a little meetup spot. This is where we're going to link up and we're going to go about our mission. And one of the very first times that we started getting attacked and our base is getting rocketed, the very first time I was kind of away from her, I just went through my battle drills. I got down, I stayed down, I waited until the explosion stopped. I started putting on my gear because I was in bed at the time. And then I scrambled out to a bunker, the closest bunker to me. These were our bunkers at our base at Camp Taji. Just concrete tubes, tunnels with sandbags all around it. And they were pretty hardy. They could take a rocket blast. So I wanted to get to those. And this one is at the beginning of a long road, and there were 4 of them, about 70 yards apart. So I got to that one from my room, and I caught my breath, because Chunky's got to hustle and all his safety gear. So I catch my breath, and then I'm like, I'm going to move to the next one. And I had to jump to all 4 of them to link up with Terry Faye so I could be with my team and we could go about our mission. And that night, it was dark. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I get into that tube, and the only light that you can see is some flashlights or some cigarette lights because it's just packed with you usually fit about 70 soldiers in there. And so I got into it, and I was going to catch my breath and was going to move on. And then something caught in my head. I was like, there's a lot of scared people in this. There's a very scared chaplain. So I got to the edge of the tunnel, and I said, hey, there's a chaplain in here. Can I pray for you? And in the darkness, it was this beautiful moment because I heard, yes, 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 all the way down the go for it, please, please. You would hear that. So I just prayed safety over these guys. Prayed safety over these soldiers. And then I ran to the next one and I did it. And anytime we were attacked at night, that became my thing. You know when I never heard in that tunnel? I never heard no, because there is no atheist in a foxhole. I can tell you from experience. But you know what else I never heard? I never heard, what denomination are you? Denomination are you? Where'd you go to seminary? Seminary. What do you think about this verse? You know, they never. What's your eschatological theology? Then somebody goes, what is eschatological? And then it becomes this whole, I never heard that. When ruin comes, people want hope. When trauma, catastrophe happens, people want hope. And they need you to let them know there is a Redeemer, that there is hope, that God is not done with you, God is not done with your story, God is not done with your family. And you may be somebody who needs a Ruth to come into your life today, or you might be the Ruth that needs to go to somebody today. But God is not done. There is hope on the horizon. And friends, hang with us these 5 weeks because a Redeemer is on the way. Will you pray with me? Father, for a story of 2 women, 2 widows, but yet it relates to so many of us here, I am thankful. And I thank you for the course of that book, that story, that you're not done with us, that there is hope, that even in ruin, we can hear today that there is a Redeemer, that there is possibility, that there is light. Strengthen our faith to hang on, God, or strengthen our faith to go to those who are barely hanging on. Wherever we are on the spectrum, Lord, may we serve the Redeemer, or may we hold faith that the Redeemer is coming for us. And Lord, as we turn our eyes towards Easter, it's with that sweet promise that you're not finished with us, that this doesn't have to be the end of our story. And there are people here today, God, that have never made that statement of faith, of trusting in Jesus. May they May they come to our prayer time this morning. May they talk with a friend who brought them or one of our pastors to learn more about what it means to know Jesus Christ, to know that he is the Redeemer and he's not done with us. Father, I thank you for this chance to gather as Believers Chapel, to come here as friends and family, that you're growing us and you're bringing new faces and new families into this story, and together we celebrate that the Redeemer lives and that the Redeemer is not done with us. I pray these things in Jesus' name, the great Redeemer. Amen and amen. Just down here to my left, your right, will be our prayer team. They'd love to pray for you if you have a prayer need or you need to talk with somebody, kind of get something off your heart, your chest. We're here for you. Anything that we can answer for you, our connection desk is right outside. Sign up to serve at the Easter egg hunt or find out more about ministries that are ongoing or things that are coming up. We're just really glad you're here. Come back, keep with us in Ruth in this series From Ruin to Redemption. Y'all are dismissed. Have a great day.